everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this virtual event. I'm so excited to be here with you and with Ellen. How exciting. And yeah, I'll kick us off with a short reading from It Had to Be You, my sweet, sexy new book that came out today. And the premise of the story is it's a Love Actually style interwoven braided narrative of 5 love stories centered around a pair of mismatched Brooklyn wedding planners. So I figured we should meet our mismatched Brooklyn wedding planners. Savannah Shipley has been named in the will of Eliot Goldenhorn, who has unexpectedly died and left his half of his business to Savannah, his secret girlfriend. And she didn't know Eliot was married, and she's shown up on the steps of Liv, his wife's brownstone in Brooklyn, where I live, ready to dive into the business of wedding planning. She set up the first meeting, and here we are in the front room of the home office. And the clients are Camille and Dave. Camille's a college friend. The only thing on the desk in front of her was a pen and an In Love in New York branded notepad. Scribbled on the first page was the word fuck, underlined 3 times. Savannah tossed it in a wastepaper basket and cleared her throat. Ahem. It is the honor of my life to help you plan your dream wedding. We will merge sophistication and tradition in ways that will surprise and delight you to create memories that will warm your hearts for years to come. Camille put her hand on her chest and gave Savannah a moved smile. Dave kissed his fiancée on the cheek. Savannah beamed, exactly the reaction she wanted. Well, why don't you start with what you have, Camille, and I guess what you need? Camille nodded, shaking her hair out with her fingers. Okay, so we're getting married on May 15th, 2 months away, which is totally crazy. I know. I was going to do all the planning myself, but work is insane. We've got the venue, thank God, a really cute farm upstate in the Catskills. We just need chairs and tables and stuff. For flowers, I'm thinking lilies, irises, things like that, very elegant and Baroque and graceful. No roses. I just don't like roses. I know, I'm weird. And obviously no baby's breath or carnations or anything like cheap looking. She was speaking very quickly, gathering speed with every word. Jazz for cocktail hour, nothing cheesy, sort of breathy and sexy and Nora Jonesy. And then a DJ who could MC. They all do that, right? Not to sound shallow, but I prefer someone who is good looking. It's probably illegal to say that, but whatever. Cocktails are important. We're sort of cocktail snobs. So we'd love a certified mixologist who's trained somewhere good and uses all fresh stuff. I don't want everyone wasted on Long Island iced teas. That's sort of my worst nightmare, apart from people not using the hashtag, which is, given Dave's last name is Seal, she looked at Savannah as if they should answer together. Seal the deal, Camille finished, as Savannah guessed, kiss from a rose. Camille looked mildly appalled. Cute, but no, and literally just said, I hate roses. Camille started ticking off her fingers. Got my dress, Dave's got his tux, need hair and makeup. Someone who's done a million brown brides before, obviously. I don't want someone who's like, I don't have foundation dark enough for you. Like, what a nightmare. Need a photographer who can shoot for social. That's non-negotiable. I have like 300,000 followers now. It's insane. Do you know any good DPs who can live stream? Definitely planning on doing a tasteful amount of SponCon, so it'll be good for you to middleman that. Sorry, should I be saying middle woman now? You know what I mean. Oh, and the caterer has to be vegetarian, gluten-free, farm to table, locally grown, 100% organic, but yummy. A deep breath, a smile at Dave. Whew, did you get all that? Savannah looked down at her notepad. Cats kills, no BB breath, Nora Jones, Baroque MC equals hot, yummy. Silence feathered into the still room. Impossibly, Liv was smiling. The sight of her smugly amused face spiked a burning flash of rage. The feeling was so unprecedented, so radically unfamiliar, that for a long moment, Savannah forgot entirely who she was. So you have your dress. Yep. Camille nodded. And Dave's got his tux. Yep, Dave nodded. Savannah pretended to write this down when in reality she just wrote fuck and underlined it 3 times. And you're thinking of sponsoring your live stream? No, I'm getting something sponsored, but I want you to organize the live stream. Camille cocked her head. Her voice became more assertive. Not to sound rude or anything, but this is our wedding and I kind of need it to be perfect. You're up for this, right, Savannah? Savannah opened her mouth, ready to deflect this silly questioning of her competence. She was Savannah Shipley, head of the yearbook committee, champion fundraiser, the best social chair Delta Zeta Lambda ever had. Not a single word escaped. Savannah stared at Liv. Please, please help me. I need you. Camille and Dave twisted around to eye the hungover, half-dressed woman on the couch behind them. Liv exhaled a short puff of air. How much? Our fee, Liv clarified, before changing it to my fee. Partial planning costs 10% of the budget or $8,000, whatever's higher. Camille traded a look of unease with Dave before turning to Savannah. I thought I was pretty clear on that. You were. Savannah heard her own voice, tiny as a church mouse. She willed it louder. You were. Mrs. Goldenhorn, I said we'd do the wedding for free in exchange for some posts on Camille's social media. Liv rose from the couch, dressing gown dangerously close to falling open, and moved to shake hands with Camille and then Dave. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. This has been extremely ridiculous. She walked out of the room, leaving everyone staring, dumbfounded, after her.
That was so magnificent. I think you should read the whole book. I have to ask, is there an audio version of this, Georgia? And did you?
Yeah, and I know, they didn't ask me. I don't know why not.
Okay.
But they have, they did it with 9 narrators. So we have a different character, someone for each character, which I'm just tickled about, and I can't wait to hear it.
Okay, that is magnificent. All right, so hello to everyone at home. I'm Elin Hilderbrand here in Nantucket. I loved this book. I loved this book. People send me books. I don't know. I get 5 or 6 books a day.
Yes, you would. Yeah.
During a certain part of the year, which is like, you know, winter, spring, because the people normally send me books that are coming out in the summer. I have piles and piles of books. It is amazing, honestly, when I actually take something out of this pile. I loved this book. I loved it. So it is one of my, I did 6 picks for Entertainment Weekly. This is one of them. And I'm also starting a book club with Literati, and this is going to be my, I believe, my July pick for my Literati book club. So I am dead serious when I say I absolutely adored this book. And as I said in my social media, if you loved the movie Love Actually, and I don't want to indicate that you plagiarized it all, but the basis of that fun movie where like the love stories are on, you're sort of invested in everybody, that is sort of the feel and the mood of this novel. So Georgia, tell us how you got the idea for It Had to Be You.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for those lovely, kind words. Yeah, I'm sure you arrive home to a truckload of books every time. And so it's just so thrilled that you connected with the story. So the idea for It Had to Be You was really an art imitating life situation, because over the entire time of writing this book, which takes place in the wedding planning business, I was getting married myself and planning my wedding. My then girlfriend, now wife, agreed to marry me at the end of 2018. I had sort of said to her, you know, like on our second date, like, I want to marry you, so just let me know when you're ready or you've got some time. Very, you know, queer girl-esque. And so she said, okay, great. I'll marinate on that for the next few decades. So I eventually managed to like pin her down and put a ring on her finger in the fall of 2018. And then we got married in summer of 2019. And that was the whole kind of time that I was writing this book. So I was very interested in weddings and what they mean and what it means to be a bride and what it means to plan a wedding and love stories, you know. And I really loved the idea that with the Love Actually structure, that I could tell all of these different love stories and diverse love stories and inclusive love stories. But it was very much about what I was going through myself at the time.
So I have to ask, did you and your wife use a wedding planner?
No, we were too cheap for that. You know, basically the whole thing was a tax write-off, obviously, because of, you know, the book and everything, which was great. But no, I mean, as sort of said in the introduction, like I do an event series, like I'm comfortable with events. I love events. Like, can you tell? Like, I'm so excited to be here. So I was like, oh no, I think, you know, we can, like, how hard can it be? Like 100 people, you get them drunk, I put on a white dress, like, you know, easy. Definitely not easy. just logistically really hard, and just emotionally. There's some sections in the book that talk explicitly about what Savannah realizes wedding planning is like, and how people who are getting married are kind of reacting to it, and how it's very different from the beautiful photographs that come out at the end, you know, when you see how the sausage gets made. So yeah, I was wedding planning and learning how to do it and writing about it all at the same time.
Right. That is absolutely amazing. I wonder, I mean, it's a surreal experience. I'm sure I can't even remember if I've ever done it myself, when you're actually living something that you know that you're going to write about. And so you're paying attention in a way that maybe you wouldn't have. I can definitely say that I've written about things that have happened to me, and I thought to myself, oh, I should have been paying closer attention. If I'd known I was going to write a novel about this, I would have. So you were definitely cognizant of the fact that you were writing the novel. I absolutely love all of the various stories, and they're all different. They're all related to the wedding planning, this wedding planning company, but they're all distinct. And the thing that I loved the most in 2021 about your novel is how diverse and inclusive it is. So obviously that was by intent. Can you speak a little bit to like how you feel, you know, diversity and inclusivity should be included in today's novels, and, you know, sort of your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I had a really fun time. I think when I write, I think like like a director. I went to school for screenwriting and filmmaking, and it's like a secret dream of mine to be a director. So I think about like working with a cast. So it was like I loved working with this great cast that I got to put together. And because of the concept of the novel, it allowed me to naturally put together a very like diverse mix of people. It's New York City, like as some, you know, lovely reviewers are pointing out, like it's just a cross section of New York. So we have, and I live here in New York. I've lived here since 2009. Moved here in the heart of the financial crisis. Great idea. So it was a really easy way to put together a cast that's diverse as far as not just like race, but sexuality, very important to me, and class and age. I run a multi-generational storytelling series where we invite a performer in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s to tell an original story on a theme. It's called Generation Women. And so I'm very interested in love stories that are not just about a small group of people that tend to get a lot of oxygen in the room, you know, younger, white, heterosexual, whatever. And so it was really, I didn't put together a diverse cast because I felt like I should, or because like, well, it's 2021. It's just more interesting. It's more interesting to be able to peek into the lives of people that are different from you, and then to also hold a mirror up to people who are very similar to you, to sort of see them even clearer. That's what I think the appeal of a diverse sort of cast is. You're either learning something new about your specific subculture, like wherever you fall into the niche, and seeing yourself very clearly, which is always a thrilling experience, or you're learning something about how, you know, interracial couple who are a couple of decades apart, like Henry and Gorman, how they operate and live. So it was fun. This book was a joy, start to end. I loved it. I loved writing it.
Yeah, no, you can definitely tell. So I want to go back. You and I met, I'm going to say, do you remember? Was it 2017? I think it might have been 2017.
Yeah, around that time.
At Books Are
Magic.
The Identicals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it was 2017 at Books Are Magic,
yes.
in Brooklyn, and yes. You came up to me and we hit it off. You're Australian. I've spent an enormous amount of time in Australia. Can you talk a little bit about how you came to the United States and when you moved to New York and how you got your writing career going? Just can we hear your sort of story of origin?
Yeah. I moved to New York when I was 29. I had lived and loved in Sydney, my hometown, for all of that time. And, you know, Sydney is a beautiful city, world class, highly livable. But like any hometown, you know, you got to spread your wings at some point. And I felt like I'd met everyone I was going to meet. I'd slept with most of them. And I just needed to, you know, get out. And I had come to New York on a 10-day trip with my then roommate and some friends, and just had this transformational experience. Like, as I think many people do, like you touch down and it's just this visceral feeling of like, this is where I'm meant to be. And I landed with no visa, no job, no place to stay beyond a 10-day sublet. I didn't know anyone. I had no real connections in the city. And I had originally planned to stay for 3 months. I was going to stay for 3 months. I was going to write a screenplay and then, you know, toddle back home. And I loved the city so much. And I also just really ran out. I was broke for many years in New York. I was very, very broke trying to become a writer, and realized I couldn't actually afford to go home and had to kind of make it work here, but I wanted to stay. And I actually did improv for many years. I really got deep into the improv scene and spent years and years just doing improv, seeing improv, hanging out with improvisers, like performing it, teaching it, whatever, before like routing back to novels. And my first book published in the US was a very ambitious sci-fi action adventure young adult novel called Parched. I have all of my little books here. This book Parched, which it took me 3 years to write. We sold it for like $7,000. And that was my, you know, very tentative first step into publishing in the US.
Okay, and then what happened? You're taking a drink.
And then,
taking a drink, yes.
Yeah.
Everything.
So in backing up in Sydney, this is my first book. This is my first baby book. It was a young adult novel called She's with the Band. And it was a very cute book about a girl who moves from a small town into the bright lights of Sydney to start a band with her friends. It was based on a band that I was in my 20s called Dead Dead Girls, which was a band that I actually started as a joke band in the pages of a music magazine that I was the editor of. It was like 2003, 2005 was the height of like the Yeah Yeahs and the Franz Ferdinand, and it was, my whole life was about music back then. And I started this fake band. We took pictures of myself and one of the editors in like wigs and sunglasses and invented this fake band that we would report on it was like an ongoing joke. They were the craziest band ever. Their shows were totally wild. Their music was amazing. They were like dating everyone. And then I realized I wanted to start that band for real. So I did. So I started a fake band with 2 of my best friends. And then I based this book off that dynamic, the 3 of us. That was this book. Very cute YA. But then I moved to New York and I wrote a sci-fi. I think I sold like 10 copies. And I was 31, 3, and kind of had that feeling of like, I gotta make some money here. Like I feel like the guy in the basement who's like, my band's gonna break out one day soon, you know, like I'm 50 or whatever. So with my first book that I sold to Simon & Schuster, I kind of like changed the game plan. I hired a freelance editor. I doubled down. I read so widely in the genre. I just sort of approached the whole thing with more of a like all in, do or die mentality. And that was The Regulars. And then I sold The Regulars to Simon & Schuster 2015. And then The Bucket List came next. And then it had to be you.
Yay. Okay, so you've definitely played the starving artist.
Oh yeah.
And earned your dues. So I want to talk a little bit about living in Brooklyn, because for me, I mean, I live on an island 30 miles out to sea. Everything is closed, even when it's not the pandemic in the winter. And so I want to talk, like, can you tell us, like, you don't really have to romanticize it, but go ahead if you want to. Like, what is it like living in Brooklyn? Like, tell me about your day. Like, how does your day unfold and your, you know, include like your work process, but I want to know like all the great details about living in Brooklyn.
Oh, I love Brooklyn. I think it's the coolest place in the world. It is sort of similar in some ways to what Sydney was like in the aughts. Sydney is a bit different now. It's a little cleaner. It was pretty edgy actually when I was living there. There was like a really cool underground theater scene and whatever, and lots of music obviously. But Brooklyn is, I mean, it's Brooklyn. There's, you know, everyone's living on top of each other. There's so many different people. My wife and I live in South Williamsburg. We're like 1 street away from where the Hasidic Jewish neighborhood starts. So it's just like, it's hipsters and it's the Hasidic Jews like all crammed in together. In a typical writing day for me, pre-pandem, I would sleep in, wake up, work in bed, and then go. I had a membership at the New York Writers Room, which is a writer's room in the city in Manhattan around Astor Place. And it's a silent working space. And so you go in there and I would typically do my writing days there.
Okay, wait.
And it's
I'm gonna stop you because I'm so curious about this. Did you find that being in, like, going to an office was motivating for you?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
So
Yeah.
rather than like, oh, I'm just going to stay home and work on it, you felt like, okay, now I'm getting on the subway, I'm going to Astor Place, I'm at the New York Writers Club, like club, I'm in this
Yeah.
silent space. And was everybody silent?
Yes. On the first day, my computer cord was caught in my keys, and I'm pulling it out and my keys jangled. And I'm not kidding you, 5 people like looked at me. I'm like, oh boy, like this is silent. Like it's
Okay.
not. I would have people tell me that my music was too loud on my earphones. Like it's quiet. But then now I'm the person who's like, if someone's jangling their keys, I'm like, what are they doing noise? Like I'm the crazy person.
And then
So
is
yeah.
there any, so then my other question is like, is there any communing between the writers, like after hours? Like, have you met anyone there that's been like sort of that you feel sort of a colleague, or it's just like you go in and you have blinders on?
Typically I'm a very social person. I love to host. I love to host dinner parties. I plan weekends away. I can be very chatty, but I will say, like in the room, and I haven't been back since lockdown started. I'm just kind of like blinders on, because part of it is you get to pour yourself into the work and like not think about anything else. Like I don't really have a 9 to. Haven't had a 9 to 5 in ages, and so just even the kind of chit chat, like the office chit chat, like how are you going? How was your weekend? Like you don't have to do any of that, and it's so freeing, because it's just like all I'm thinking about is the work, and I don't need to socially lubricate the situation and make everyone feel comfortable and whatever. So I am radically like I don't want to say unfriendly, but possibly that's true.
No, right. I mean, I would be, if I went to something like that. So the whole idea of like writing with other people around me gives me the chills. Like I would never in a million years do that, but I can see how it would be motivating. Like a lot of times, because I write in my house, and a million things happen, and I've got 3 children. I mean, 2 of them are out of the house. One of them's home. And so there's always an interruption. The worst, I don't know if you agree with me, but the worst enemy to any writer is your phone, because
the
you just
internet.
get on the phone and you're scrolling, and all of a sudden half an hour is gone. And I say out loud to myself, put down the phone and then, get back into what I'm doing. So I can see how it would be really motivating. It's just the whole idea of like, and then I'm like, are you wondering like, what's everybody else writing? Who are they? What are they working on? Like that would it would freak me out. I think, but I'm like so curious that it seemed to work. And then, okay, Georgia, presumably when the pandemic started, this book was already finished.
Yeah, finished.
Okay. So are you working on something new?
Yes. Yeah, I finished. I just handed in a new draft to my agent today. Hi, Alison. I know you're watching. And which I'm a massive fan of yours as well. Which I'm really excited about. It's another ensemble rom-com with a queer love story at its giant beating heart, very heartfelt and warm and beautiful. The same sort of feeling of It Had to Be You.
Okay, I love that. Okay, so let me ask you this question. So on the tail of that, so when you were writing this new book over the pandemic and you couldn't go to the writing room,
yeah,
did you find your process was different? Like, were you affected? Was it difficult to write in your apartment? Did you go, I mean, I don't even know where else you might have gone, but can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, my wife just launched a business and so we were both working from home. We have a lovely apartment. We have a beautiful apartment. Here we are. But yeah, we're both working from home, and so we have a second bedroom, so we split off using that. And it, like the first few months of the pandemic to me were honestly like kind of lost months. I had a book idea that I was convinced was great, and then I pitched it to my agent and she was like no, and then I got really upset, like and then we went, actually my wife and a friend of and I just spontaneously decided to drive to California at the end of May on a 2-week road trip, and then we're away for 9 weeks. And so I was just sort of living my best pandemic life or whatever, and just sort of breaking up, because we've been like in lockdown in New York, which was really grim, like so frightening and horrible those first few months. So it wasn't really kind of a productive time. But then when we got back from that road trip in September, on the last night, I had some idea. I had this idea that I wanted to do an autofic, like something that was really based on my life. I was like, that's what I'm going to do. Everything makes sense now. Like, that's what I'm going to write. And I wrote a chapter that was like one step away, like a breath away from my wife that I'm meeting for the first time. It was the most horrible writing experience of my life. It was putting yourself into fiction is horrendous. Never do it. Like, just the character was called George, you know what I mean? And then I kind of was like, oh, well, maybe it's just I'm going to push through or whatever. And then on the last night before I flew back, I had a dream about a new book. And I woke up and was like, that's what I'm going to do. And I threw the autofic stuff out and then wrote an outline in a week and sent it to my agent. She's like, yep, great, good to go. And then I wrote like the whole thing in like 8 months.
Okay. That's very, very good point. I also happen to agree, putting yourself in fiction or anybody that you know, because that's a question I get asked every single time I speak, is do you base your fiction on people you know? And the answer is, my answer is, and your answer is, no, I don't, because you can use details from, it's impossible not to use details from people you know, but people, actual people do not belong in fiction, because fiction is crafted to make sense with the narrative and hopefully like a plot, and human beings, actual human beings don't fit in fiction. We don't fit.
I agree. I mean, it's sort of like there's bits and pieces of people that are pulled. But ultimately, also, I don't want to lose any I don't want to damage any relationships. And you have to have like a very clear-eyed view of a character and not be afraid to pull any punches.
Right.
And I don't want my friends or family to think that I'm like judging them or something. I don't know, you know?
Right. No, that's extremely, extremely important. Okay, so let's see, where should we move next? So it sounds like your pandemic wasn't so bad because you were on the road. Can you talk a little bit about this road trip? Like, most of the country is compromised, but it's summertime. So it sounds like it's summertime when you leave. So things are outdoors. So can you just give us some highlights?
Yeah, I mean, it was a wild road trip because we were still being so careful. Like, we weren't touching anything, we weren't having any contact with anyone. Like, we weren't like popping into shops or local cafes or anything. We were like, everyone was like locked down. But my wife's family's in California, and she just has a new niece, and we wanted to see the baby and everything. And so we got to LA, and then we spent 2 weeks on the road. We drove through Montana, and I had never seen these parts of the country. It was so beautiful, like just that whole the South, the Dakotas, oh, gorgeous. And then we were in like Tahoe for a week, and then we got to LA, and everyone was really moving around a lot. Like, people were visiting family and whatever. So we called it grifting. We grifted for 7 weeks, staying at friends' houses who weren't there, and it was very energetic. And we just sort of every day we were like, where are we going today? Like, where were we sleeping tonight? And we just like pieced this trip together for so long. And it was, I guess one day I'll have to write about it. It was so fun and energizing. And I think that we were more connected to nature over that trip. And this book that I then came home and wrote is in a beautiful wild setting that is very much about the natural world and highly engaged with the natural world. And so it was so like, it just felt right to be writing about that in this time. I just couldn't write about a city. I had to kind of like get to the beach, as you know, like how thrilling it is.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Okay, so I want to ask a little bit about your reading life. Can you tell me some things that you've read in like the last year or 6 months that have really resonated with you, and like what kind of things you like to read and how often you read?
Yeah, I read I mean, I wish I could, everyone wants to be able to read more, I wish I had more time to read. I really loved Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam, who it's his third book. It's so good. It's just, every line is perfect. I just absolutely loved it. And I recommend that to everyone. I just started, my friend Hannah Orenstein, who I'm doing an event with tomorrow, lent me, and I just opened up and I've read the first few pages of Detransition Baby, which everyone is talking about, which I'm like, I know I'm really going to dig that book. by a trans writer about like trans women. So keen to read that. I mean, I do read, of course, a lot of rom-com. Like I just immersed myself in the genre writing over the period of writing this book, and now I am so excited for Casey McQuiston's One Last Stop, and loved Red, White, and Royal Blue. What a perfect story! So much fun, and so sexy and youthful and modern and all those sort of things. So reading their work, and I mean, I was researching a lot for this new book, and so I was reading a lot about birds, and I read these books by this writer Jennifer Ackerman, who is like the world's residing bird expert. I know a lot about birds. Ask me anything about birds. They're fascinating. And just the chance to do sort of research like that is so fun, because it really breaks up. Like I'll read literary fiction, I'll read rom-com, I read 28 Summers, of course, cried at the end. So beautiful. Oh, what a great book. And then I'm reading about, birds and stuff. So my reading is all over the place, kind of thing.
Okay, well that's amazing. So I also want to ask, because I find this completely fascinating. What are you binging on Netflix, Hulu, etc.? I am binging. I just have to say this because I am binging this great show. I don't know if I can't tell because I'm so antisocial and I live on an island and I'm still sort of, I'm completely vaccinated, but I'm still like not out there. I'm watching.
Yeah, it's a slow transition.
I know. I'm watching a show called Pen 15. Have you heard of this show? Has everybody watched it but me?
It's so good. Oh my gosh, so funny. Absolutely obsessed. Those women are just hilarious. And I love how much they dig into making fun of themselves. Oh, genius.
It is. So for anybody watching us,
you have to watch it.
15. I can't describe it properly. Georgia, you'll do a better job.
It's these two women who they're in their early 30s.
Yeah.
In their 30s, and they play themselves as middle school students. And like the braces, like the bad posture, like the terrible haircuts. And it is so funny. It is so cringy. And it just brings back like every moment that your life was destroyed by like the stroke of a gel pen. And, and all of the other actors are children, which makes you realize like, one, how rarely we actually see that, because I guess because of casting and whatever, teenagers are played by 20-year-olds, and it's so rare to actually see like 10-year-olds in a cast, but all of their kind of fellow actors are all these kids that they're like having first kisses with. It is so great. It's so great.
It's so great. I feel like when I describe it, I make it sound really campy and silly. It is like so heartfelt, like so well written, so brilliant. And it's funny and it's sad. And, my daughter is 15. She watched it. So few shows.
Oh God.
That I'm 51 that she and I can watch together, and we're both, and then like in the morning when I drive her to school, she's like, because she of course finished it. And I'm like, okay, I'm on, season 2, episode 1. And she's like, okay, what's happening? And oh my God, but it's real. I mean, it's adult. I mean, that's the thing I want to say. It's adult. And, but so good. Anyway. Okay. So that was my
everyone
show.
Has to watch that.
Now you say a show.
All right, so a couple of shows. What I've been watching, I really loved the show that came out in March 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic called Feel Good, which was created by and starring the Canadian comedian living in London, Mae Martin. It's a 6-part series for Netflix, and it is a narrativized version of Mae's own life. And as they start dating a woman who hasn't dated women before, and is about Mae's a recovering addict. And so it's about love and addiction as a theme. It's very funny and sexy and truthful and modern. And that was kind of like the thing that got me into my head about autofic. Like, I got to write an autofic because this show is so good.
Oh, right.
And really obsessed with that. Wait,
say the name. Mae. Say the title again.
Feel Good.
Feel good. Feel Good. Okay.
Yeah. And it is feel good, but it's also kind of dark at the same time. So that is my recommendation, and everyone has to watch that show.
Okay, perfect. All right. So we should probably go to the questions. Hold on. I'm going to go to the questions. Okay. We asked about the audiobooks. Okay. Here's a question from Charlene Keller. Charlene is from Canada. I know her very well. Do the names of your books ever change while you write them?
Yes, this book changed 3 times, believe it or not. The first title was Better Wed Than Dead. And Better Wed Than Dead was the first name of the wedding planning business in the book. And my agent said it sounded like a wedding planner who solves murder mysteries. Fair enough, it does. And I guess that would be a good book, but not the one that I had written. And I thought it was the first iteration of this book, because this sort of went through some changes, was much darker and snarkier in tone. And it sort of suited that more because Liv was a bit darker, a bit more damaged, honestly. It didn't have the kind of joyous, light-filled feeling that it has now. And so Better Wed Than Dead was the title. Then we changed it to In Love in New York. And it was just a little tricky to say. Also, my smart editor, Emily, felt like it was a bit too regional, like a bit too much like about New York. And so then we had a meeting to come up with the new title. And I tried so hard to think of something that was like that I would own the SEO on, that it would be completely original, but I just couldn't think of it. And then we were in our meeting and we were thinking about like beautiful love songs and like classic songs, and It Had to Be You has such great rom-com history. It's in the theme song of When Harry Met Sally, and Diane Keaton sings a beautiful version of it in Annie Hall, and it has all of this sort of great history. So yes, the title of this did change. Yeah.
That is a very good answer, and I love the title. I just am so in love with this book, you guys. Okay, we're going to take a couple more questions here. This one is long. Let me read it here. How long did it take for you to complete the first draft of this novel? Halfway through my own first draft, wondering if there's a normalish timeline it should take. And in terms of research, any tips for how to best conduct research for a novel?
Sure. So Alison and I sold the first draft of this. I've sold this off a submission. It was 25,000 words that I had done, and my editor bought it. And then after that, I had a drink with her and said, I had a feeling that she didn't love it. And I said, just be honest with me, which is a great way to start any sentence. Do you like this book? Do you think it will sell? And she said, no. And which is why you have a smart agent. And she's like, I think there's a real, lean into the warmth of this idea. Like, this is a beautiful story. And it was very dark and snarky in the original version. And so I could have just said, you know what, we've already sold it. I'm just going to go with my, first draft here. But that's why you have a smart agent, is they kind of give you the, they give you the lowdown. So I rejigged it and went back and threw out that 25,000 words, kept the premise, but started again in 2019, the year I was getting married. And then wrote the first draft of that over, and the first and second draft of that over a year. So, but like, honestly, like this, this book, Patch, this took me 3 years plus to write. And I'm a faster writer now, but it's because it's my job and I do it all the time. And it really is just doing your 10,000 hours and getting it in. So there's no normal time. So don't worry about that. And as far as research goes, I love research. I'm really into research, and I did a lot of research for this book. I shadowed a wedding planner. I went to a wedding as an assistant, and to get like an idea of what it would be like to attend a wedding, like a pivotal moment in people's lives, as an anonymous person who's not connected to it at all. It's a strange position to be in, to like be in the room and everyone's having this like intense experience, like during the ceremony and everything. It's like you remember it for your whole life, and I'm just like serving food and whatever. It was great. But yeah, there's no kind of like handbook on how to do that. But I think that with research, what I've found is that people like talking about what they know, which is generally their jobs. And often you're researching based on profession or someone's experience. Like there's a character in It Had to Be You, Darlene, who's Black and who thinks about racism and talks about it. And of course, I can't write that. So I worked with early readers and had them kind of help me express what she would be saying and thinking. And part of that is just asking nicely, finding who's into the idea of working with you, and just starting with a phone call. Like, if I was to say, and this is what happens with all novels, like, hi, I have some questions for you that I might be coming back to you for the next 2 years over. Is that okay? Like, everyone's going to be like, go away, crazy person. Who are you? But if you're like, hi, I have some questions about your job or about your experience, like, would you mind if we could do like a 10-minute call? And some people will say, sure. And then you kind of get them in and then you reel them in. And that's how I kind of pull people into my little world. And then I'm emailing them for the next 2 years, asking them things. But by then it's too late. They've committed, so.
Okay. And we're going to end with this question. It's a little serious, Georgia, but let's see if we can get it in. How do you think the pandemic will affect the cultural backdrop of future storytelling? As in, do you think that it will be acknowledged going forward in the same way as other historic events, for example, World War II or the Great Depression? And do you have any thoughts about how it might impact that storytelling? Do you think authors will hop over 2021 and try and forget it ever happened? I want to speak to this actually myself.
I'm so curious in what you think.
Because I wrote a novel. I mean, I have a book out every year, and I wrote a novel that is technically set in 2021 that's coming out. No, that's technically set in 2021 that's coming out in June 1st, Golden Girl. And I wrote it during the pandemic, and I do not mention the pandemic. And the reason I don't mention the pandemic is because I finished it. I had to turn it in October. And if you remember correctly, like in October, we still don't know what's going to happen. Things are still really bad. You're in the middle of it. I didn't feel like I could address it in any kind of real way because I wasn't really sure what was happening. I then got COVID in December. I was so sick. That was during my revisions. And now my question is, now I'm writing a novel that's set at a hotel called the Hotel Nantucket that's going to come out in 2022. And I'm asking myself, do I include the pandemic or do I just pretend like it didn't happen? And I'm not sure. I'm still in the early stages, so I'm not sure if I'm going to include it or not. So how do you feel?
I think that what we're going to see in literature is not necessarily, obviously people, especially in the nonfiction world, will be thinking and writing about it. But I think we're going to see the themes that came up, which were shifting, like reassessing what it's all about, thinking about like people coming home to family, like sort of less about the actual content and more about the feeling and the way that it changed us. So that the book that I wrote over a lockdown it's about a group of people who are stuck together in a lovely place. But as a result of being stranded together, everything about their relationships and their life plan changes because they're sort of suddenly thrown off the tracks of their regular life. So then they have to reassess their lives and work out if they're really doing what they want to be doing, if they're really in the relationships they want to be in, what is the way forward, what do I really want to do? So I think that those kind of ideas in a broader bird's eye view are what we're going to be seeing explored in literature, maybe as well as, but like writing about the pandemic is really difficult because like we've all had a 360 experience, like it has been like the best of times and the worst of times. Like it has been a really good priority shift for me. Like I've really realized, oh, you know what it's all about? Like family and my personal relationships, and that's what matters. Like that's what really counts, and my friendships, and it's like less about like going out and partying in New York or whatever. Like, so I think those things are going to stick and stay. But yeah, you're right. Like it's difficult to even write about it now because we're still in it. It's still happening. And you don't want to have like the wrong take on it. Like things could go sideways again. Like we don't know. So I think that it's like thinking about it from more of a thematic point of view might be helpful. And I think that's what we'll see. I think that's what we'll see reflected in the books that come out in like 22, 23, so on.
Yeah. I think that's actually a really gorgeous answer.